Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Taehoon King,
I'm John Mason.
I'm Kevin Delgado.
Ray Chang.
and welcome back for the second time to Our Way of Life by SADPIE Enterprises. Last episode, me, Ray, John, and Kevin shared our thoughts on racial discrimination alongside its outreaching and piercing impacts on the Asian community here in the United States. In this episode, we will be discussing the deeper histories and the origins of Asian American discrimination, alongside how that discrimination continues and persists to influence our modern perception of Asian Americans in our societies, and especially in the educational environments today. Please, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy our second episode as we, this time, dive into the deeper trenches of Asian American discrimination and specifically how it is reflected in modern society and education today. So, reflecting upon the history of the Asian American community, um, I have a question for all of our podcast members and leaders today. So, for how long have Asians, and especially the Chinese community in particular, been in the United States? How long have the Chinese and the other communities that we have today been here for? Um, Mr. Ray Cheng, would you have an answer for that?
Well, I would say Asian American discrimination kind of like its origins trace back to when like Chinese Americans first immigrated to the United States, like during the Industrial Revolution, in search for a better life. And most of these Chinese immigrants were like they were laborers. They came to the United States as laborers seeking jobs in factories. And as a result of this Chinese immigration to the United States, we see like these Chinese workers kind of taking over jobs in factories and industries and replacing like other white laborers since they were more competent and they worked for lower wages. And this and their replacement of white workers in industries and in these factories that kind of served as like a source for dissent against Asian Americans or specifically Chinese Americans by white nativists. And as a result of that, we see like
Mm-hmm.
legislations like, for example, the earliest like Chinese Exclusion Act, like trying to prohibit these Chinese Americans from for immigrating and assimilating into American society.
I see. So, upon the topic of the white laborers in America feeling in this particular way towards the certain Chinese laborers who were working here in the United States during this period in time, how would you feel if you were one of those workers coming to the United States of America for jobs and being received by the people of America in this particular way, Mr. Ray?
Well, if I was one of those Chinese immigrants, like I would obviously be enraged, right? Like, why am I being treated like this? And why am I being treated like this just because I'm a foreigner coming to this country? Like, I would be kind of like confused, like I would be confused if like a country like the United States, they believe in natural rights, they believe in like these ideas of equality, liberty, then how come they aren't spreading those ideas? Why are they keeping those ideas to themselves, like these white nativists? And why don't we, like as immigrants, have these same liberties, these same freedoms?
Understood. So, I, for particular, would probably react in the same way that you would have probably reacted, and it's very ironic since that America is idolized as this land of liberty where all of these people from different cultures and ethnicities are all welcome. For example, even on the base of the Statue of Liberty, it is said, "Give me your huddled masses." By huddled masses, I would probably interpret that as not only the white Europeans coming overseas for labor and also jobs, but I would probably I would probably interpret this idea for being an American as, oh, I can come here and I can live a new life. I can be whoever I want. But when I'm being received like this in America by these other workers who are competing with me and also continuously abusing me just because I wanted a new life in this country, I would feel in the same way too. Now, moving on to a second question. Could we talk about the different contributions and the conflicts in the Asian American community? Mr. John Mason, would you like to take the floor, please?
Well, one notable racial conflict that resulted in atrocities done to Chinese Americans would be the Chinese massacre in Los Angeles in 1871.
Whoa, whoa,
Between
whoa, wait. Los Angeles.
what
That
happened?
is a very interesting city to pick out of all of those. And this is something that I find very interesting because today Los Angeles is a very diverse and also very accepting location. It would be very hard to recognize Los Angeles as a race divided and also a very racially conflicted society as a society when in our current world today we have this very diverse and also this very accepting Los Angeles we have today. So could you please continue and elaborate for us, Mr. John Mason?
Well, the massacre took place as a conflict between two rival Chinese groups, and it even resulted in the death of a white saloon owner named Robert Thompson. We can expect that this only cause further lashback from the white nativists as they see, oh, like these Chinese people when they fight each other, they even result in casualties done to the white people in California.
Mm, I see.
So it's kind of like a positive feedback look. It further intensifies the exclusion that white people want to place on Chinese Americans and Asians in general.
I see.
Intensifies the racism.
So I also have another question regarding your opinions on this particular topic. Um, if you were one of the saloon workers during that age, that of which have recently seen one of your fellow businessmen pass away because of this tragic incident, how would you feel about this incident, and how would this contribute to the issue with the Asian American community during that time?
Well, if I were to adopt a nativist kind of perspective, then obviously it will be unbelievable hatred and distrust of these Chinese Americans because just based on like their physical appearances, their facial looks, they're very foreign to the American view of like what is considered white people and how now with them being in American society, being in American cities like Los Angeles, and they had resulted in casualties such as the fellow
Saloon
saloon
worker,
owner Robert Thompson, then it only make us further hate,
antagonized.
yes, antagonize those Chinese Americans.
Ah, yes. Good feedback. Anyways, I also wanted to ask you another question from our third member, Mr. Kevin Delgado. How would this certain conflict that we had almost years ago, or no, wait, not even years, but centuries ago, still affect us today and also affect our educational environments, especially today?
So basically in talking about these events with like the Los Angeles massacre and then obviously the passing of the Chinese Exclusion Act being sort of the first federal law to target a specific like a cultural group in America. um it will like these events and targeting specific cultures and specific groups have effects today um for basically um it continues to show how like Asian Americans today like basically still face the like stereotypes and biases in like particularly in like say the educational realm, um and say that how Asian Americans today are basically seen as like high achieving students, which basically uh puts sort of pressure on these students themselves. And so these events of the past in which nativists and like the rising Anglo-Saxonism um, has developed against the rise and like sort of the growing like immigration waves of Chinese and just Asian American groups in general. Uh, and those stereotypes then continue to basically be seen throughout the course of history from the time of the early comings of Chinese Americans up to now, where many of these groups still face stereotypes and harsh prejudices that come their way.
Um, I get what you are saying here. However, about the different stereotypes that of which the Asian American communities back then and today still have. Um, what were some of those stereotypes that were present during those two times, and how could they have been different? And could you provide us with some factual evidence or some real
Um,
evidence about those issues?
One of like the significant Asian American stereotypes that developed basically was the like the yellow peril, Asian American stereotype, which was basically um, it was essentially a racist term that was used to describe Asian Americans as a threat to like the existing Western civilization and a threat to white America itself.
Hmm. Would it be very different from the kind of racism that we experience today and back then? I mean, if I were to
Mm.
reword this question, so how would that stereotype of the yellow peril be different from how would yellow peril, in a sense, be different between our society today and then back then, between COVID-19 and also the certain racism that we faced back then, and also the certain racism we faced way back then during our immigration into the country?
Well, sort of like the stereotypical terms like yellow peril in past years, they still are similar to current stereotypes in that they both sort of depict like the threat of like immigration and like a sort of like xenophobia type of like response among like native people in America. Like they still imply that sort of threat that because Asian Americans are outsiders, we do not want them like to integrate them within like communities in America because they are outsiders and foreigners. So that's sort of a similarity that stereotypes of the past have with now. But specifically about yellow peril, this sort of stereotype in itself basically refers to the fear that Chinese would basically invade the lands and disrupt many of the Western values and of like Western democracy and many of like the religious ideas here in
Mm.
America with Christianity, which is not much the case nowadays.
So reflecting back on what we have said so far about our history in the Asian American community, while we were for the first time when we first stepped into this country, moving on from that and into the modern world, what are the biggest leading causes to discrimination against the Asian American community today? Would anyone like to answer that question?
In society today, there are like multiple factors that cause like the Asian American discrimination that we see today, like such as kind of these historical stereotypes that have been developed throughout our history, throughout the history in the United States as ever since the Chinese immigrants first as as Chinese immigrants first immigrated to the United States, and the buildup of these stereotypes and conflicts, like tense conflicts between white nativists and Asian American groups, uh, it leads up to modern stereotypes today,
Mm-hmm.
like such as the model minority, which originated within the mid 20th century, and it's also has to do with like our curriculum, our educational curriculum, in which um like there's not there's not much representation of Asian Americans in courses such as literature or history, and this underrepresentation can cause like a one-dimensional and ignorant view towards Asian Americans, and then and it kind of causes this lack of empathy towards Asian American groups, which not only leads to direct bias against Asian Americans, but also like implicit bias, which is like we associate Asian American groups with different things, such as being like socially awkward without like a clear reason. We just associate them with these ideas because of this ignorant view that we get from the stereotypes that we have today.
I hear you, Mr. Ray. And you were talking earlier about the certain lack of care or the certain lack of
Empathy.
no, not empathy, however, but the certain lack of content that was dedicated to the Asian American community in educative courses such as American literature and also American history. So this is a very general question for everyone here because I know that we are all juniors attending high school right now. So far in your high school experiences, how often have you read books about the Asian American community, or how often have you seen the Asian Americans or the Asians in general mentioned in your literature or your history classes? This is a question for everyone. So, Mr. John Mason, how often would you have heard about your community in your courses?
Well, personally, the problem is I haven't heard much about the Asian American community in any of our courses and
I see.
studies.
I see. Mr. Kevin Delgado, what about
Uh,
you?
yeah, so for me personally, in my courses, it's pretty much the same as John, like not much talk besides recently in our history class for United States history, where we've
Yes,
been discussing the Chinese Exclusion Act, but that's pretty much it.
I see. Um, Mr. Ray Cheng, would you also like to give insight into this certain
Okay.
question?
All right. So my United States history course, we briefly talked about Asian Americans, like, but we talked about it in the context of the Industrial Revolution,
I
and
see.
also the Transcontinental Railroad. But other than that, we haven't really touched on anything any other things specifically regarding Asian Americans. And I also remember once, like last year in our world history, or no, not world history, but like world literature, we read this short story by Amy Tan called Two Kinds. It kind of tackles a common like a common stereotype towards Asian Americans, kind of about the model minority, as I mentioned before, by showing that like the main character in the story is like she's far from perfect. She's not like she doesn't represent this model minority idea of like a hard worker or like a very hard worker or like a very successful person as like as Asian Americans are commonly associated with.
I see. So out of all of the four of us here, including me, I would say that not many of us, 3 out of 4 of us, I believe, have not really seen, heard, or known about the Asian community and also its history or its literature in our history or literature courses at our school. So this is also a problem, as Ray has mentioned, in that it has fed to the ignorance of our culture, to put it in a certain way. Moving on from this issue in particular, about the recent issue with COVID-19 a few years ago, of which I personally believe has, in a way, contributed to the negative viewpoint of Asians recently, the negative reputation of Asians in recent times. How did COVID-19 really impact the Asian American community as a whole? And why did COVID-19 impact the Asian community and especially the Chinese in this certain way? What led to all this? Mr. Kevin Delgado, would you like to have a say in this matter?
Yeah, so as I was speaking earlier, with the stereotypes associated with xenophobia and like this common like idea among many native like Americans here, white Americans here, about basically not wanting to integrate Asian Americans into community, for they see them as foreigners, right? And especially with the onset of the COVID-19 virus itself, many people in America associate the virus, like the origin of the virus, um, being spawned within like the Asian individuals themselves. Many stereotypes and many people like falsely, like unfortunately, falsely claim that like Asian Americans basically carry the virus and are responsible for the spread of the virus itself.
I see. Wait, however, could we also have more insight as to why they would blame us for carrying this virus known as COVID-19? How did this virus start out? Where did it begin?
Well, the virus itself is reported to begin in the latter like days of like 2019 and opening the 2020 year in Wuhan, China. And so that's the origin that has been said to related to COVID itself.
I see. So, having two members of the Chinese American community here with us, Mr. John Mason and Mr. Ray Ching.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you react to this? Do you believe that this justification of, oh, because it started in Wuhan, China, it must be the China virus, or it must be a virus started by the Chinese. How do you feel about that? And Mr. Ray Cheng, what would you feel about that?
I like personally feel that like this COVID-19, like the
Yes,
COVID-19 virus,
is
um,
it?
having the blame be put on Chinese Americans and other Asian American like ethnic groups is kind of just out of like racial aggression.
Anyway, so if this question was a little bit too confusing, I was asking for your opinions about would it be understandable to try and blame a certain racial group for something that they had no control over, or even something that might have actually happened because of something else rather than their own race or etc., or something related to their culture.
I think like this COVID-19 virus, it's associated with Asian American groups, like for the sole reasons that um like the virus originated in the Wuhan province of China, and
So
also
I'm asking, do you believe that it's justified or no?
yeah, so I don't think it's fully justified, like laying the blame on the ethnic groups that come from that specific country, because it was out of their control. And I think it's just an ignorant view. Like for example, on like social media, we can see like these. We can also see videos of Chinese people eating exotic foods like bats. So it gives like a further reason for people to blame Asian Americans, specifically Chinese Americans, for the virus. Like, oh, them like these Chinese Americans eating bats or and these kind of exotic foods must have led to this virus, and they they make that claim without like any clear reason, like or any clear evidence to support that. So I just think it's an ignorant way of looking at the virus.
So it would be these people on social media, and from what I've seen, certain news outlets that have blamed us for this virus because of the certain things that we have allegedly ate. Am I right, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Raching?
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Now, it is certainly it is certainly applaudable that COVID-19 has played a massive role in displaying the Asian Americans in a negative light. However, I also wish to talk about a different topic and also a different issue involving Asian Americans um, in a certain part of US politics that have been a very sensitive topic to touch for a very long time. So, about the recent issue with the political discussion behind education, what really is affirmative action, and why does affirmative action have such a profound impact on America and the Asian community in America today? I mean, what are its certain benefits and drawbacks that make it so attractable or so negative to some people? Mr. Ray Ching, I know that you have done some research prior to this, so would you like to share with us?
All right. So as we like briefly mentioned last episode, affirmative action is just this idea or this policy that is implemented by colleges and other educational institutions in order to promote an ethnically diverse student body. But this affirmative action, however, though it aims to promote this ethnically diverse student body, it comes with a kind of these drawbacks to other ethnic groups, especially Asian Americans, which we have seen with the recent Harvard University lawsuit by an organization called Students for Fair Admissions. So this organization, Students for Fair Admissions, kind of argued Harvard's use of affirmative action has led to discriminatory practices that exclude Asian American applicants from being admitted. And as a result of this case, like affirmative action like has been eliminated from a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, which has sparked even more debate on affirmative action, on whether it is truly beneficial for all students across all different ethnic groups, or if it's only beneficial to some and harmful to others. And we can see this kind of debate like on, for example, on ABC News there was an interview in which an interviewer on this television or this news program interviewed two different students. One of them being Bami Amizori, which is a Black student who claimed that the Supreme Court's ruling is unfair to other ethnicities because it kind of causes underrepresented minorities. It gives underrepresented minorities, such as that of her minority, like being further underrepresented in education. But like other students, like Alex Shea, also on ABC News, in an interview, he said, like this ruling by the Supreme Court on affirmative action has actually it's actually beneficial for all students of all different ethnic groups because it allows, as he says it, the educational institutions to view students for who they are as individuals and not and that students aren't admitted based on their race. So in the context of affirmative action, there can be more direct exclusion of ethnic groups like Asian Americans in particular, but also in the absence of it, there is still this unintended ethnic exclusion due to some ethnicities of students dominating the student body of educational environments like colleges, which make affirmative action such a hot area of debate regarding racial representation and equity.
I mean, wow, looking at this really complex issue with affirmative action and whether or not it is justifiable to still have it into effect or just cancel it altogether out. So, I know for a fact we have a non-Asian in our podcast here today with us. So, as a man of Hispanic descent and also Hispanic race, how would you feel about affirmative action? Do you think it's justifiable, and do you think it deserves to still be in power and also play an impact on admissions, or would you take the opposite side and also say that it is not justifiable to have it within our curriculum of admissions any longer?
Well, obviously, from sort of a competitive standpoint, if you see it from that way, I would perhaps not be in favor of it. But if the overall purpose is like, say, to promote like equal representation or like a diverse student body, then I'm supporting that. Yeah.
I see. Would anyone like to object to his ideals or his statement?
I
Mr.
can.
Yes, so John Mason, you have the floor.
Well, I might object about maybe the equal representation of the races because personally, in my opinion, I don't think that needs to be considered as much if you were to focus on observing the individual more, like his or her character and basically their performance in past education in their high school
Mm.
and
Mm.
basically look at the individual, him or herself is most important because like every single applicant for some college is unique, and that's why it's most important to emphasize that.
Moving on from this topic, I mean, wow, just looking back to our conversation just right now about the history and also the deep impacts of racism in the Asian American community and also how it still plays a role today, and comparing these two different things that of which have occurred between our experiences with our immigration to the States and then our experiences with COVID-19 and also affirmative action. It's very interesting, but moving on from this topic, um, we as students, we as the SADPIE enterprising group, what can we do to at least suppress the impact of discrimination of American students of Asian descent today in and out of our campus. So what can we really do about any of this? Do we really have any power, or do we have anything to do about this? Mr. Kevin Delgado, would you like to outline our plans?
Yeah, so in basically addressing the issues of Asian discrimination in our community, we as like our group of SADPIE Enterprises, we would like to basically move forward with a sort of social media campaign or with these podcast episodes that we've been doing where we highlight the different multitude of Asian cultures and where we detail their individual histories and like where we and like the Asian discriminations and that many of like these individual cultures individually have faced here in America. And that's what we plan to do. We plan to continue with these podcasts moving forward. We also plan to bring individual people from these distinct cultures onto our podcast from our local community at our school, um, basically getting insight into how they've experienced racial discrimination and potential solutions that they may have in telling their stories to better create a safer environment and community for Asian Americans.
I see. Anyways, would anyone else also like to add on to that? Um, because I would like to talk about also our website that we'll be creating and also releasing very soon. And also upon our website, we'll be talking about this very soon. We will be also releasing surveys for people to take about their own experiences about racism and also their own opinions. Well, not opinions, but there are certain questions that will help us, SADPIE Enterprises, configure this experience in a way that'll talk about your experiences if you're comfortable with it, and also more enhance this experience for your own tasting or your own liking. Well, it really looks like this is all the time we have for today, friends. So thank you everyone so much for listening in. We truly do hope you have a wonderful day, evening, or night wherever you are. I'm your host, Taehoon King,
I'm John Mason.
I'm Kevin Delgado.
Ray Chang.
and you were listening today to Our Ways of Life by SADPIE Enterprises. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.